When I first met Emily Carter at NYU, I thought I was just another guy doomed to admire her from a distance, the kind of girl everyone whispered about but no one dared to approach, a flawless ice queen who lived in her own world untouched by the noise of campus life, yet I couldn't help myself, something about the way she tucked her hair behind her ear while reading, the way her eyes stayed focused on a book while ignoring everyone around her, it pulled me in like gravity and before I realized it I had already made up my mind that I was going to chase her down even if it took everything I had. Even if I had to make a fool of myself in front of the whole university, and so I did, over and over, starting with the garden behind the library where I stood with my heart pounding out of my chest and confessed that I liked her, only to have her glance up, push her hair aside with that cool detached expression, and say in a tone as calm as ice water that the joke wasn't funny and I was wasting her 15 minutes, before brushing past me as if I were nothing but a mild inconvenience, but what she didn't realize was that her cheeks were flushed pink, her fingers clutched her book too tightly, and I saw through the facade. I knew she wasn't as unaffected as she pretended to be, which only made me want her more, so I came back again, this time in the middle of class, deliberately sitting next to her after getting her schedule from a friend in the engineering program, watching her take notes with perfect precision while I leaned against my hand, spinning my pen and staring at her until her face turned crimson and she stopped writing altogether, so nervous she couldn't even pretend anymore. And when she finally glanced at me I slid her a note that said, "You're blushing, pay attention to class," just to see her nearly combust on the spot. It didn't take long before she caved and after a week she cornered me in the lecture hall after everyone left, asking what exactly I wanted from her, and I smirked and told her it was obvious, I was chasing her. She bit her lip and reminded me she had already rejected me once, but I shrugged and told her that was her problem, not mine. I was going to keep chasing regardless, and then I leaned closer, close enough for our breaths to mingle, and teased her with a condition: if she let me kiss her once I'd stop bothering her. Her voice trembled when she asked what kind of condition that was, but in the end she whispered, "Just once," and I agreed with a grin, pressing my lips against hers in that empty lecture hall as the sunlight poured through the windows. And even though she shoved me away the second reality hit her, even though she stumbled over her own words and ran out clutching her bag like she was escaping a crime scene, I knew I had already won because the way she froze when I called her name and shouted after her, "Emily, I like you," the way her steps faltered told me everything I needed. She might pretend otherwise but she was mine from that moment forward, and I wasn't about to let her go, not when I'd already seen that behind the walls she built around herself was a girl who felt just as much as I did, maybe more. I doubled down on my pursuit, finding out she had signed up for a volunteer event in Manhattan and making sure I joined too, and when I spotted her in the crowd standing alone in a beret with that aloof posture, my heart practically leapt out of my chest, because she looked like she had stepped out of a painting, flawless except for that faint scar that cut across the side of her face, something I had heard whispers about, something others said ruined her beauty, but to me it made her even more captivating. And when she noticed me looking her way I mouthed, "Sweet," at her, making her ears turn red as she whipped her head away, but I knew she had read my lips perfectly. Later that day the rain came crashing down and I was stuck under a shop roof soaked to the bone, but then through the sheets of rain she appeared, sprinting with an umbrella, her dress clinging to her from the downpour, cheeks red, breath heavy, and when she finally reached me and admitted in a shaky voice that she had been worried about me, I realized this girl wasn't just an ice queen, she cared enough to run into a storm just to find me, and when she finally lifted her hand and revealed the scar hidden by her hair, whispering that she wasn't pretty enough, that I would regret liking someone like her, I stepped forward, took her trembling fingers in mine, and told her I already knew, that I loved everything about her, the quiet parts, the strong parts, the scar too, because all of it was her, and I couldn't get enough. Then I brushed my hand along that very scar and told her I found it beautiful, before lacing my fingers with hers and asking if my soon-to-be girlfriend would give me another kiss. And when she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to mine under the last drops of rain I knew this wasn't some casual fling, this was it. Emily Carter was mine, and I wasn't letting her go, not then, not ever. So yeah, maybe my friends joked that I was crazy, maybe they whispered that she was out of my league, maybe some people called it nothing more than a bet, but as far as I was concerned it had never been a game, it had always been serious. I wanted her, and I was willing to do whatever it took to keep her. Which is why when she smiled for the first time and let herself relax into me, I knew I'd just stepped into something that would change my entire life, because loving Emily Carter wasn't just a choice, it was destiny, and deep down I already sensed that our story was only just beginning and that the hardest part wasn't winning her heart but proving to her and maybe even to myself that I would never, ever treat her as anything less than the one person I was always meant to be with, and that belief would be tested sooner than I imagined. Dating Emily Carter was like stepping into a dream I didn't want to wake up from, the kind of dream that felt too good to be real, where every stolen kiss in the library, every whispered word in the shadows of stairwells, every moment when her hand trembled in mine was a reminder that somehow I had managed to win over the most unattainable girl on campus, the one everyone else thought would never let a guy close. Yet behind closed doors she wasn't the untouchable ice queen people saw but a girl who melted against me, who flushed pink when I teased her, who trembled whenever I kissed along her jawline and pressed her against the wall, and I lived for those moments, I lived for her gasps, her soft protests that always contradicted the way she pulled me closer, because it was like discovering a secret side of her that belonged only to me. But as graduation loomed, the real world started to creep in. I got an internship at the New York Times and suddenly my days were swallowed whole by assignments, interviews, and late-night edits, while Emily landed an online contract with an international firm that valued her design work and let her work from home, which should have been a blessing but only widened the gap between us. Because while she waited in our apartment, cooking meals and sending me texts asking when I'd be back, I was out chasing stories, answering her with quick half-hearted replies like, "Don't wait up," or, "I'll be home late," convincing myself it was temporary, just until I proved myself at the paper, but I didn't notice how the distance was eating at her until it was too late, until the sparkle in her eyes dimmed every time I walked out the door, until her texts became longer and my answers became shorter, until one night she showed up at my shoot in the freezing wind, wrapping her arms around herself with that stubborn pout on her lips, and my coworker Nathan Reed was running his mouth about, "When we get rich we'll order girls to come sing and drink with us, James will get his perfect sultry type and I'll get my sweet girl type," and I kept coughing, trying to shut him up, but then I saw Emily standing there, her expression tight, lips pressed together, her eyes full of something between jealousy and sadness, and when she finally slipped her hand into mine I realized she had heard every word. The ride home was silent except for the way she bit her lip and whispered under her breath about sultry women, her insecurity leaking through no matter how hard she tried to hide it, and when I tried to explain, saying Nathan was full of it and I didn't care about that nonsense, she only half believed me, her little ears twitching like she wanted to trust me but couldn't silence the voice in her head telling her I wanted something she couldn't give. That night she sat on the bed in nothing but a thin silk nightdress, her hair still damp from a shower, reading under the warm light of a lamp like a scene ripped straight from a fantasy, and when I came out of the bathroom she put her book down, her eyes meeting mine with a dangerous glint, her voice low and husky as she asked if I thought she was sexy, if she was enough, if I needed some older seductress type to keep me interested, and before I could answer she was on me, pulling me down, whispering that if I ever wanted to order girls I could order her, that she would be whoever I wanted her to be as long as I never left her, and I realized then just how deep her insecurities went. How badly the rumors about us being just a 6-month bet had sunk into her heart, because no matter how many times I told her I loved her, that she was the only one, she always looked like she was waiting for the day I'd wake up and say I was done, and it killed me to see the girl who once stood untouchable in everyone else's eyes trembling in my arms, begging for reassurance, trying to shape herself into whatever version of woman she thought I wanted, when all I had ever wanted was her exactly as she was. Still I didn't know how to fix it, I didn't know how to fight a battle I couldn't see, because the enemy wasn't me but the doubt festering inside her, the whispers of others that told her she wasn't good enough, that she was just a scarred girl who had been chosen for a dare, and as I buried my face in her neck that night, listening to her soft sobs turn into uneven breaths as she finally fell asleep in my arms, I made a promise to myself that I'd prove to her, to everyone, that this wasn't a bet, that it had never been a bet. But fate has a twisted sense of humor, because just when I thought things couldn't get messier, Vanessa Collins showed up again, smiling sweetly, sliding into our circle of friends, acting like she had every right to be there, and Emily's eyes hardened every time she saw her, though she never said a word, just held my hand tighter like she was afraid I'd slip away. And that was when I began to realize the cracks in our perfect world weren't going to fix themselves, that if I didn't Confront them head on, they would only grow deeper, and soon Emily wouldn't just be the girl who worried silently, she'd be the girl who believed beyond a doubt that I was going to leave her, and if that day ever came I wasn't sure if I'd be able to forgive myself for letting it happen, because loving her wasn't optional anymore, it was everything, and the thought of her slipping through my fingers terrified me more than anything else in the world, which is why when the night of the celebration banquet came, when Emily dressed in that fitted dress with her scar half hidden by soft waves of hair and her eyes brimming with a mix of defiance and fear, I knew that the next chapter of our story was about to test every word I'd ever said to her, every promise I'd made, and whether or not I was strong enough to hold on to the girl who had already given me everything she had. The night of the celebration banquet was supposed to be simple, just a company event to reward our team for finishing the project, but of course nothing in my life with Emily was ever that simple, because when she walked into the ballroom on my arm, dressed in a sleek mermaid-cut dress that hugged her waist and a necklace I had given her glimmering at her throat, every pair of eyes turned, jaws dropped, and the people who had whispered for months about our so-called bet finally got their first real glimpse of the girl I had been hiding away, and they couldn't believe it. My co-workers muttered things like, "So this is James's girlfriend," and "No wonder he's been glued to his phone," and even the women at our table gave her compliments that sounded half like confessions, telling her she was too gorgeous to stay behind the scenes, suggesting she should try modeling or being an influencer. But Emily just smiled politely and held on to me tighter, though I knew inside she was nervous. I could feel the tension in her fingers where they gripped my arm, and then of course Vanessa Collins was there too, sitting across the room, sipping her wine with that infuriating smirk like she knew something Emily didn't, like she was waiting for the moment to pounce, and I hated how Emily's eyes flickered to her every few seconds even though she pretended not to care. Hated that Vanessa's presence was enough to shake her confidence when she had every right to stand tall and proud, but Emily chose a different tactic that night, one I didn't see coming, because when the chatter at the table turned to promotions and money and what we were all doing with our lives, she casually leaned in and said, "Well, we're saving up. We have a baby to think about," and the entire table went silent before exploding with shock, everyone staring at her stomach as if they could see through her dress, while I nearly choked on my drink, trying to deny it, but she only leaned closer, slipping my hand onto her waist, and smiled with that mischievous tilt of her lips that told me she was enjoying the chaos, enjoying watching the rumors twist into something new, but also hiding something deeper, a desperation to mark me as hers in public, to make it impossible for anyone to question where I stood, and as much as I wanted to scold her later for tossing out a bomb like that, I couldn't deny how much it turned me inside out to hear her claim me like that, to watch her look at Vanessa as if to say, "He's mine and always will be." After the banquet, when we finally left and I draped my coat around her shoulders because she was shivering in that thin dress, she stumbled on her heels and I caught her, crouching down and telling her to get on my back, carrying her across the cold parking lot while she buried her face in my neck and laughed softly like a girl who had never known heartbreak, and for a moment I let myself believe everything was perfect, but deep down I knew it wasn't, because later that week on the basketball court Vanessa cornered me, her words cutting straight through all my defenses, confessing that she liked me and blurting out the truth behind the rumors, that months ago some of my so-called friends had set up a stupid bet, 6 months to win over Emily Carter, and everyone thought I had only gone along with it for fun, that our entire relationship was nothing but a ticking clock about to run out. And the worst part wasn't what Vanessa said but the way she added that Emily knew, that Emily had heard about it from the start, that she had been counting down the days until I dropped her like everyone expected, and suddenly everything clicked, the late-night glances at my phone, the way she clung to me as if I might vanish, the constant need for reassurance, her sudden declaration about a baby, all of it came crashing down on me and I realized she had been living under the weight of that rumor the entire time, torturing herself with the idea that I would leave once the deadline hit, and tonight, the night Vanessa chose to confess, was the exact last day of that so-called 6-month bet, and my blood ran cold because I understood why Emily had been so restless, why she had clung to me harder than ever, why she had looked at me with those sad eyes when I left for the banquet. She thought it was over, she thought I was going to break her heart, and I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand that she had carried that fear alone without telling me, so I shoved Vanessa's hand off my arm, told her she didn't know a damn thing, and ran faster than I had ever run before, straight back to our apartment, every step echoing with the thought that if Emily was home crying, believing I had only played with her, believing I was about to walk away, I might never forgive myself, because the truth was simple, I had never cared about a bet, I had never cared about what anyone else thought. From the moment I kissed her in that lecture hall to the moment she showed me her scar in the rain. I had known she was the one, and the idea that she doubted that broke something inside me, so when I finally burst through the door and saw her curled up on the couch with half-empty wine bottles around her, her hair a mess, her eyes glazed from tears and alcohol, mumbling to herself that I was probably out with Vanessa, that tonight was the end, I froze, my chest tearing apart, because she wasn't just drunk, she was broken. Broken by me, by my silence, by my failure to see what she had been enduring, and for the first time in my life I didn't know how to fix it, didn't know if words would be enough, because she looked at me through the haze and whispered that even if it was all a game she didn't care, she would rather be my toy than lose me, and I swear those words cut deeper than any knife, because Emily Carter, the girl who once stood above everyone else, was begging to be degraded just to keep me, and I realized right then that if I didn't tear down every wall, if I didn't rip apart every rumor and prove to her with everything I had that she was my future, not my temporary thrill, then I didn't deserve her, and that thought kept me awake long after I carried her to bed that night, long after she clung to me in her sleep whispering not to leave. Because part 4 of our story wasn't going to be about chasing or teasing anymore, it was going to be about fighting like hell to show her that the only bet I had ever made was on forever. When I woke up the next morning after finding Emily drunk and broken on the couch, the apartment was quiet, too quiet, and the space next to me in bed was cold, her side of the sheets already abandoned, but she'd left a note on the nightstand in her neat handwriting that said breakfast was on the table and she'd gone out for some air, and it hit me that she was embarrassed. Running from the things she'd confessed while drowning in alcohol, running from the raw vulnerability she'd shown when she clutched my hand and whispered she didn't care if I was playing with her as long as I didn't leave, and as I sat there staring at that note, I felt my chest tighten because it wasn't fair, none of it was fair, she shouldn't have to live every day wondering if she was enough, wondering if I was going to leave her when some imaginary clock ran out, and I knew if I didn't shatter those doubts soon, we'd never last. So when she came back later dressed up in some ridiculous cosplay-like outfit she clearly bought to appeal to me, her cheeks red as she asked if I didn't like it, I understood immediately this wasn't about seduction, this was her desperate attempt to hold on, to turn herself into whatever version she thought I wanted, and it broke me, because while yes, she looked gorgeous and my body reacted instantly, I forced myself to stay cool, folding my arms and asking her straight out why she was doing this. Why she felt the need to perform instead of just being herself, and she finally broke down, eyes filling with tears as she admitted she was scared, scared I'd stop loving her, scared I'd find someone else prettier, less scarred, more exciting, that our relationship was only built on a stupid bet and I'd eventually throw her away, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I grabbed her face in my hands and told her I didn't care about Vanessa, didn't care about rumors, didn't care about anything except her. That she was the only one I wanted, not because she was perfect but because she was real, because she was the girl who ran through the rain for me, who kissed me under the sunset in an empty lecture hall, who carried that scar like a reminder of everything she'd survived, and that scar made her stronger, more beautiful, not less, so when I fastened the diamond pendant around her neck and whispered that it was a reward, not a bribe, that it suited her because she was the only one I wanted to shine for me, I watched her eyes light up with something between hope and disbelief, like maybe, just maybe, she could trust me, and I realized I had to keep reinforcing that truth every single day. At the banquet that weekend, when she walked in on my arm wearing that dress and that necklace, heads turned, jaws dropped, and whispers spread like wildfire, but Emily didn't shrink back this time, she smiled, held my arm tight, and when people teased her about being beautiful enough to go viral if she wanted, she leaned close to me and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We're saving up, we have a baby to think about." And suddenly the entire ballroom fell into chaos, people congratulating us, my co-workers staring like they couldn't believe it, and even Vanessa's smirk faltered for the first time, but what got me wasn't the rumor or the lie, it was the way Emily looked at me afterward, daring me to correct her, to deny her, but I didn't, I just let it stand, because if that was what she needed to feel secure, then fine, let the world think she was already the mother of my child. Maybe then she'd finally realize I wasn't going anywhere, and when we left that night I covered her in my coat, carried her on my back when her heels made her stumble, and brought her to the car where I opened the trunk to reveal a mountain of Juliet roses, because if she needed proof, then I'd give her proof in every way I could, roses, diamonds, public declarations, whatever it took, and as we drove home with her dozing in the passenger seat, her head resting on the glass, her fingers clutching the pendant like it was her lifeline, I remembered the moment years ago when I first saw her in that Brooklyn alley, the moment she shoved me out of the way and took the blade meant for me, the moment her scar was carved into her skin because she chose to save me, and I realized she had been carrying that reminder all these years while I had been carrying the guilt of not finding her sooner, not telling her then and there that she had already become the most important person in my life. So when fate brought her back to me at NYU, I had disguised my determination as a bet just so I had an excuse to be near her, but the truth was I had never needed a game, I had been hers from the very beginning, and as I glanced at her peaceful face in the glow of the dashboard lights, I made a vow that no matter what happened next, no matter how deep her insecurities ran or how vicious the rumors got, I would fight every single day to prove to her that our story wasn't some cruel joke, it was destiny, and the rest of the world could choke on their doubts, because Emily Carter was mine, and I was never letting her go, and I knew the battles ahead were only going to get harder, because Vanessa wasn't done, the whispers weren't gone, and Emily's doubts weren't erased with a single kiss or a single diamond, but I was ready to face all of it, because part 5 of our story wasn't going to be about proving myself to anyone else, it was about proving it to her, again and again, until she finally believed that forever meant forever. The week after the banquet should have been easier, the roses should have silenced her doubts, the necklace should have reminded her every time she touched it that I wasn't going anywhere, but love isn't that simple, not with Emily, not when she's been scarred inside and out by people who told her she wasn't good enough, and the rumors about the bet still lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear, so even though she smiled more and clung to me less like she was finally starting to believe me, I could still see the flicker of insecurity in her eyes every time I got a late-night call or had to run out for work, and I hated myself for it because I knew I was feeding her paranoia even when I wasn't doing anything wrong, like the night Nathan invited me to another game and told me Vanessa would stop by, and I didn't even want to go but I did anyway, convincing myself it was nothing that Emily would understand, except the second Vanessa walked in smiling and acting like she belonged, I felt my stomach twist, because Emily's voice from that morning was still in my head, asking quietly if I'd be home for dinner, and me answering distractedly that I'd eat out, the disappointment in her soft, okay, hitting me only now, too late, and when Vanessa pulled me aside after the game, her eyes full of some kind of desperate plea, and told me again that she liked me, that she couldn't stand watching me throw myself away on a girl who didn't deserve me, I snapped, I told her to shut the hell up, told her Emily was the only woman I wanted, that she had no right to even say her name, but she didn't stop. She kept insisting that Emily was too fragile, too broken, that she wasn't someone I could build a future with, and I realized then that this wasn't about some childish crush anymore. Vanessa wanted to replace her, to steal her spot in my life. And my anger burned so hot I left without another word, racing home like I had fire in my veins, but when I opened the door, Emily was already asleep on the couch, the TV still flickering, a half-finished cup of tea on the table, and my heart broke all over again because she hadn't been able to sleep without waiting for me, and I crouched down, brushing the hair from her face, whispering that I was sorry, that I wasn't going anywhere, that I didn't care what anyone else said, because she was it for me, and she stirred, blinking up at me through sleepy eyes, whispering, promise, like a child clinging to her last bit of hope, and I kissed her forehead and told her yes, 1,000 times yes, and she smiled faintly and curled into me as if she believed it, but I knew the storm hadn't passed, I knew the real test was still coming, because I had learned something that night. Vanessa wasn't going to stop, and neither were the people who wanted to see us fail, and Emily wasn't just fighting them, she was fighting herself, fighting the voice in her head that told her every day she wasn't enough, so if I didn't find a way to crush that voice once and for all, we'd keep circling back to the same pain, and I couldn't let that happen. A few days later I caught Emily on the balcony late at night, her phone pressed to her ear, her expression tight as whoever was on the other end spoke, and when she hung up her hands were shaking, her eyes red like she'd been holding back tears, and before I could even ask what was wrong she threw herself into my arms, clutching me so tightly it hurt, whispering, "Don't leave me," over and over, and I knew it had to have been Vanessa, calling to rub salt in her wounds, to remind her of the so-called deadline of the bet, and the rage that surged through me was almost unbearable, but I swallowed it down because what Emily needed wasn't my anger, it was my certainty, so I kissed her hair and told her to look at me, told her that I didn't care what anyone said, that she was my light, my forever, that I'd already chosen her and no one could change my mind, and I saw the doubt start to crumble just a little, saw the tears turn to something closer to relief, and I promised myself that I'd never let her face this alone again. But the irony of life is that just when you think you've got it figured out, it finds a new way to test you, and the next test came fast, in the form of Vanessa showing up at another event where my co-workers were gathered, sliding into the conversation like she belonged there, making subtle comments that had everyone side-eyeing Emily, and I watched the love of my life sit there, shoulders straight, smile fixed, pretending she wasn't bothered, but I could see the way her nails dug into her palm. The way she avoided looking at me, and I knew that after the banquet, after the baby comment, after all the roses and promises, the rumors were still winning, she was still scared, and that night when we got home she finally broke, standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes, telling me she didn't know how much longer she could live like this. And I felt like I'd been punched in the chest because I realized the truth. Emily wasn't afraid I didn't love her, she was afraid she loved me too much. Afraid she'd given me everything and that one day I'd walk away with all of it, leaving her empty, and if that happened she didn't think she'd survive, so she begged me again, in that broken voice that shattered me every time, to never let her go, to never make her regret giving me her heart, and I held her and swore on everything I had that I wouldn't, that she was mine and I was hers, and nothing could change that, not Vanessa, not gossip, not scars, not doubts, because Emily Carter was the only bet I'd ever made, and it was for forever. And as I kissed her under the soft glow of our hallway light, tasting the salt of her tears, I realized that part 6 of our story would be the one that decided everything, whether she would finally believe me once and for all, or whether I would lose the only woman I'd ever truly loved to the shadows of her own fears. I don't know if it was fate or just the cruel sense of timing the universe has, but the night everything finally came to a head started like any other. I was coming home late from the newsroom, my mind spinning with deadlines, only to open the door and find Emily sitting in the dark living room with a half-empty wine bottle beside her, her hair falling messily around her face, the glow from the muted TV throwing flickers of light across her pale skin, and the moment I stepped in she whispered my name like she didn't believe I was real, then laughed bitterly and said maybe it was another hallucination, maybe I was really out with Vanessa right now, and I felt my stomach drop because I realized the voices in her head had won, the rumors had finally pushed her over the edge, and she looked at me with those wet eyes and confessed that she knew tonight was the last day of the so-called bet, that she had braced herself for me to come home and say it was over, and I swear I wanted to punch myself because I hadn't seen it, hadn't realized how deeply she was still carrying that weight, so I walked straight to her and said her name, firm and clear, and when she flinched like she thought I was about to confirm her worst fears, I grabbed her trembling hands and forced her to look at me, telling her she was out of her mind if she thought I was going anywhere, that I never gave a damn about a bet, that I never once saw her as temporary, and the only plan I'd ever had was to love her until my last breath. And the words poured out of me like a dam breaking, all the things I'd held back, all the memories I'd never told her, about the day in that Brooklyn alley when she pushed me out of the way and took the blade that left her scar, how I had carried the guilt and the admiration ever since, how I had looked for her for years until I found her again at NYU and used that ridiculous bet as an excuse to stay close because I didn't know how else to get her to notice me, and when I said those words she froze, her tear-streaked face softening in disbelief, whispering, "That was you," like she was piecing it together, and I nodded, telling her that from the very beginning she was it, that she had always been the one, that every moment since then was just me trying to get back to her, and her sob broke into the quiet room, raw and heartbreaking, as she buried her face in my chest and begged me to never leave, and I held her tighter than I ever had before, swearing that I wouldn't, not now, not ever, and that even if she doubted herself, I would keep proving it until she finally believed. That night wasn't about passion or desperation like the others had been, it was about connection, about stripping away every lie and rumor until only the truth remained, and when she finally kissed me it wasn't frantic or fearful, it was slow, deliberate, like she was letting herself trust me for the first time without reservation. And when we collapsed together afterward, she whispered against my neck that she would stop hiding her feelings, stop pretending she was okay when she wasn't, and that she would tell me everything no matter how scared she was, because she finally understood that I wasn't her enemy, I was her partner, and hearing that felt like the first sunrise after a long, brutal night. The next morning she was gone when I woke up, but this time there wasn't panic, there wasn't fear, because on the nightstand wasn't a goodbye note but a message written in her elegant script: "Breakfast is ready. Don't forget, we're forever." And it was such a small thing, but it hit me harder than any grand gesture, because for the first time she wasn't questioning me, she was declaring it, and that was all I had ever wanted. Weeks later when we walked into another gathering, hand in hand, with her scar uncovered for the first time in public, her hair swept aside proudly, and people stared but didn't dare say anything, I knew we had won, not against Vanessa, not against the gossip, but against the doubts that had lived inside her since the day she got that scar, and when Vanessa tried to approach again, smirking like she still had a chance, Emily beat me to it, holding up her left hand with the necklace still glinting at her throat and saying loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sorry, I'm with him. And it's not ending. Ever." I didn't even have to add anything, because her confidence said it all, and the look on Vanessa's face when she realized she had lost for good was the sweetest victory I could have asked for. Driving home that night, Emily leaned against the window, her fingers tangled with mine, and asked softly if I thought we could really make it through everything, and I laughed, because the answer was so obvious to me now. I told her that love wasn't about never doubting, never fighting, never hurting, it was about choosing each other every single day no matter what, and I promised her I'd keep choosing her until I had nothing left to give. And she smiled, finally, not a forced smile, not a smile masking fear, but a smile of someone who believed, and I knew then that we had reached the place we had been fighting toward all along, not a perfect love story, but a real one, the kind where forever wasn't just a word but a promise we both intended to keep.